Welcome to part 4 of the Element Enduro Class 2 build. So to start off with, yes, I understand that this is in fact not an Element Enduro. The Element Enduro is still here, but the direction of the project has changed, so I figured I would start the video with an update. So what had happened was, I was talking to my wife the other day, and I said something about her going out crawling with me sometime, that, she might actually enjoy it. And to my surprise, she basically agreed and said, yeah, I'll do that, but you gotta build me my own truck, and it has to be Chiefs themed. We are in Kansas City, so the Chiefs theme makes sense, and my wife is a bit of a Chiefs superfan. Where the VS410 Phoenix comes into play is that the day before this all went down, I had noticed that Vanquish was having a sale on the VS410, and I kind of wanted one, had it in my cart, talked myself out of buying it a few different times, but when the wife said that she wanted her own crawler, I decided that the Element would be the perfect chassis to do that with, and therefore I bought this for myself to replace that. What I'm going to do is I'm still going to build the Element, but rather than building it as a dedicated Class 2 rig for myself like I was going to do, I'm going to build it as more of an all-around rig for my wife to drive. I just thought I would show off the VS410 Phoenix. I've been wanting a Vanquish crawler for quite a while. However, if you've ever looked at these things, they don't exactly give them away. And so it was really nice to see that they finally came out with a version that I could actually afford. And so yeah, this is going to be a project for another day. But right now I'm just going to put it on the back burner and get back on the Element build. So on to part 4 of the Element Enduro kit build. If you caught that, I actually said part 4 rather than part 3. Part 3 was supposed to be the build-up of the Holmes Hobbies Crawlmaster Mini V2 ESC. However, I royally screwed up part 3. I did build it up, it does work, but for some reason I apparently don't know how to properly use a camera, and all I ended up with was a bunch of corrupt files, so there's no video of it. So with that being said, it doesn't really matter a whole lot, because since I am changing the direction of this build and I'm now going to build this as a truck for my wife to drive rather than a dedicated Class 2 competition rig, I'm not all that worried about the weight of it like I was before. So I'm not going to be using the brushless Outrunner motor. I'm not going to be using the Holmes ESC in it. I'm probably going to go with just something like a regular 35 turn brushed motor and probably a Hobby Wing 1080. I haven't completely decided yet exactly what I'm going to do, but those are kind of my go-to, so that's probably what it'll end up with. This is going to be kind of a starter rig for my wife, and that's a totally proven combination, and it'll be just fine. Other than that, I'm not going to change a whole heck of a lot. I'm still going to install the lay-down servo, the small battery tray, and the other odds and ends that I had for this truck. I will probably put different wheels in it than the ones I built up in part 2. I believe those wheels will probably end up on the Vanquish VS410. I haven't completely decided yet, but that's probably what's going to happen. So I've thought a lot about how I actually want to do this kit build and document it. There's a few guys out there that have already built these things up on YouTube, and watching a guy sit all night and build a crawler is not all that exciting. I won't claim to be great or fast about it. I actually have to stop and read the directions and figure out what screws go where. So I can promise you it would probably be a really boring thing to watch. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with sort of an unboxing. I'm going to take everything out, see what we actually get, and I will probably go through and build it in phases. I'll probably build up the axles and transmission first. We'll see what the directions actually show on this one. I'm not really sure. That's generally how I do a kit. And then I'll move on to the chassis. But I do have some aftermarket parts I'm going to be installing in this, so I will probably just use those as kind of build highlights. I will stop and I will show the things that I do different from the base kit, and that's probably going to be about it. And then once the chassis is built up, I'll probably make other videos on what electronics I choose, installing electronics, and then on to the body. That was one of the deals. My wife gets to choose the body she wants, and we haven't picked one out yet. Okay, so let's start by getting this thing unboxed and see what we've got. So if you're not aware, there are actually two versions of this kit. There's the original Builder's Kit, and there's the Builder's Kit 2. This is the Builder's Kit 2. And as far as I know, the big changes are that this one comes with high clearance links. It comes with a few of the hard parts that people normally replace. It comes with an aluminum panhard bar mount. And it comes with the factory team shocks, which I guess are supposed to be better than the ones in the original Builder's Kit. I can't say that with 100% certainty. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot of changes. The Element has proven to be a good platform. It just had a few shortcomings, and I kind of think that they addressed those with the kit too. Well, let's see what we got in here. So that's going to be our rear body mount. We've got one bag with our drive shaft pieces in it. And this is the, looks like front, so this is going to be front axle. Bag 5, and it looks like bag 6 is our rear axle parts. So one thing I'm noticing about this kit is it does have parts trees, so a lot of these things have to be snapped off these trees. The last couple kits I've built didn't have trees, and I actually really liked that. I hate cutting that stuff off and cleaning them up. Alright, bag 7 looks like it's got all our links. These are the Delrin ball ends that it comes with. Some plastic servo horns, which are going to go straight in the trash. And if there's all our ends. Okay, bag 9. Looks like this is going to be shock stuff. Where's the bodies? Yeah, the bodies are in there. So this is all of our shock pieces. Looks like bag 4 is our transmission. And one cool thing about these transmissions, if you're not aware on the Element, you do get to choose what overdrive you want. You can set it up for overdrive, you can set it up for 1-to-1, however you want to do it. I think that is a totally cool feature of this truck, and one of the reasons I actually chose it to begin with. Alright, and this bag 3 looks like is our battery trays. And this is another piece that I will not be using, and I will get into that later in the video once I get the chassis built up, and I will show the battery tray that I'm actually going to go with. It's going to be much smaller than this, so these aren't even going to get used. Bag 2, nothing but parts trees. So I've got all kinds of miscellaneous chassis pieces in here. I see sliders, I see bumper mounts, looks like shock mounts, receiver box, our skid. Yeah, I think that's about it. So that's going to be most of our chassis pieces, other than obviously the frame rails, which are bag 1. Metal C-channel frame rails, pretty normal stuff. And it looks like they give us a little tube of grease. That's kind of cool. Don't know if I'll use it or not. I have a certain grease that I like to use, but I may just go ahead and use this since I got it. It's all the same, really. And I'm guessing this is probably, yep, it actually says on the bottle, 30 weight. Well, 300 CST, so I'm guessing that's 30 weight shock oil. I don't know. So here's our instruction book in bag 12, along with all of our stickers. Probably something else that will not get used. Not a big fan of the stickers, but they're there. And here's something that's really cool. I knew that Element did this in the Enduro Ready to Run trucks, but I didn't realize they did it in the builder's kits. So what we got here is actually a scale garage. I'll have to figure out how to take it apart without destroying it, because it kind of seems like I'm just going to rip the damn thing in half. Here we go. See if we can get the other side. So basically this thing folds out to a scale garage. I'll have to figure out how to set it up and actually use it for something, but that's kind of cool. It's got some different signs in here that you can probably cut out, put on little scale posts. If you have a scale crawl space that you need signs for, Sasquatch crossing, that's pretty awesome. Little signs with bullet holes in them. Yep, I dig it. Alright, we'll just set that to the side. So I'm going to start off with actually opening the book and seeing where it tells us to start. As a general rule, the kits that I've built so far have you start with the differentials, with the transmission and transfer case, and then the shocks, basically all of your sub-assemblies, and then they move on to building the chassis, and once you get the chassis built, you've got all your drivetrain stuff ready to go and install. And I don't know if this is going to be different or not, but it actually looks like that Element has you go ahead and start on the chassis. So it's a little different than the ones I've done, but that's cool. So yeah, it looks like we get to start on the chassis. They got everything labeled by gates, so I guess they're making a play on your competition crawling here. So gate 1 through, gate 1 through, well, yeah. Gate 1 is all chassis build up. Gate 2 looks like you add on some extra chassis pieces, receiver box, that kind of thing. Gate 3 is installing electronics. Alright, gate 2, I don't really understand this because I've got gate 1 still showing as gearbox. So I don't really understand this because they've still got gate 1 over here, but they show it starting on gearbox assembly, and then gate 2 on gearbox assembly down here. So hell, I don't know. Maybe the way they do it is gate 1, 2, and 3 is on every page. And that kind of looks like what we got going on. Yeah, alright. So it looks like they're going to have us start on the chassis, then move on to the gearbox, and then we go on to, yep, differential assembly, building links. That always sucks. I do not have the special tools to build links, so I just have to do it by hand. Then we move on to shocks. That also pretty much sucks. I don't have any special tools to do shocks. And then putting everything all together. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And looking at this on gate 1, or page 1, I'm not really sure how they're doing this. Anyway, gate 1, page 1, they show bag 1 and 2. And it looks like bag 1 and 2 all the way through bag 3. Okay, yep, so I guess I'm going to start on bag 1 and 2. I'm going to get those put together and then I'll start the camera back up. Okay, I've worked my way through the first couple pages and I've got the chassis built. So I thought this would be a good place to stop and go over what I've done so far. To this point, the build has gone smooth. I haven't found any mistakes in the book or anything of that nature. And the instructions are fairly clear. There's a couple things I wish they would have been a little bit more clear about, but I think that's pretty standard for just about any kit. So I want to talk about the things that I've changed from the way the kit comes out of the box. So far, the most notable changes are going to be the DSM off-road servo mount and the DSM off-road battery tray. The original servo mount that comes with the kit is this dual servo mount, so it does allow you to mount a servo winch and a steering servo right up front, and that's pretty cool. A lot of kits don't do that, or a lot of chassis anyway don't allow for that, and you have to buy aftermarket parts to mount your servo winch if you want to go that direction. However, even though they do give you the option of mounting 2 servos, I don't like how high they sit up in the front of the truck right there. So basically that would mount in between the frame rails there, and your servos would end up yay high somewhere. And if you can see this one, the servo pretty much disappears behind the frame rails. So this is my steering servo, and I've just stuck a Power HD 20 kilogram. This is basically a Amazon servo that I had laying around that I bought for some project a while back and never used. So I'm going to throw that in there for now. I'm going to see how it works. Might upgrade that later. We'll just see if it lasts and if it has enough power. So the way this works is it replaces the original servo mount with these 2 3D printed pieces right here and right here. So the front one obviously is your steering mount. The back one is going to be for a servo winch if you decide to install a servo winch. Right now I'm not going to. I do have one for this truck, but I want to wait until I get the axles and everything in and see what kind of clearance I have down underneath for the winch spool. And then I'll go from there. I might end up installing it later, or I might end up installing a scale witch up front. I'm not really sure. Kind of depends on what body that my wife decides to go with. So as far as the battery tray goes, this is a really cool piece. The original battery tray is actually in this bag right here, and I haven't even opened it because I'm not going to be using any of this stuff. The only thing in this bag I'm going to probably use, I did notice that they give you an actual metal servo horn right there in the battery tray bag. So I'll probably end up using that. But other than that, none of this stuff's going to get used. But what they do give you is the full-size battery chair. If you want to use just a big, huge hard pack LiPo or something like that, you install that. They also include what they call a shorty tray, which is right here. But to me, this is not a shorty tray. The batteries I like to use are these little Tattoo 850s, and compared to what they're calling a shorty battery tray, it's absolutely huge. So anything like that is just going to be extra weight. And also the way that it mounts, you have a cross member that ends up right here about where this battery tray is, and then the tray mounts on top of that. So you end up with the battery kind of sitting right in here across both frame rails. So on this DSM battery mount, you just strap your little Tattoo 850 in there, and again, it keeps the weight nice and low. It's down below the shock towers, down in the frame rails. Probably can't get much lower without interfering with suspension pieces, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. So beyond that, the other pieces that I have are going to be the receiver box. I'm not going to end up using that. If you do like to use receiver boxes, it mounts right on there. But what I do is I waterproof my receivers, so I really have no use for a receiver box. All that is extra weight, so I don't use them. So the receiver box pieces aren't getting used, battery tray pieces are not getting used, factory servo mounts not getting used. They also give you a set of rock sliders that they call out in the first page, and I did not install those because it's highly unlikely that they will end up being used with whatever body we decide to go with on that. So for now, they're just going to go off to the side. Don't really have much use for them. And they do give you some extra shock mounts. My assumption is that that's for a shorter wheelbase, because the way they mount it would mount way down here. So I believe that's if you decide to go to a short wheelbase. I don't really think they would be useful for anything else. So one cool thing that they do in this kit is that they do include, like I said, this dual servo mount, but they also give you this little tray here. And what the tray is if you don't use a servo winch, then you can go ahead and install this tray on there, and that gives you a nice little place to install maybe a receiver or a speed controller or whatever you want to put there, some kind of little equipment tray. And then you still got room for your steering servo over here. I think that's kind of cool. Again, I'm not going to be using it, but it's kind of a neat option because I did something similar in my SCX-10-2, but I actually built my own tray. So, I don't know, I thought that was kind of neat. But for now, we're going to throw that off to the side. Won't be using any of that stuff. So, looking at the instruction manual, I've pretty much gone through page 1 and page 2, and now I'm on to building the gearbox. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the gearbox, and it does show in here, it makes a little note that this is overdrive option 1 that they list as stock. Now this one does have the option of a 6-point something overdrive, which is I guess what they're calling stock, and a 10-point something overdrive. So in the back of the book, it does go over the different options for the overdrive configurations. You've got option 1 that they're calling stock, which I believe is a 6% overdrive. Then you've got the option 2, which is going to be the 10% overdrive. And they've got a no overdrive option, but you actually have to buy the gear set to do that separately. It doesn't come with the kit. So I'm going to go ahead and do the stock one for right now. I don't want to get too aggressive with the overdrive just to start out, because I do want this to be a dual use trail truck and competition truck. And they do also show down here the option for flipping the motor around. So if you want the motor to face forward rather than backward as the kit is configured, then you have to buy an extra top shaft and you can flip the whole thing around. I'm not going to do that. I don't have that shaft, so I'm just going to go ahead and build it as stock and try that to start out and see how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the gearbox, and I will update when I'm done with that. So there's the gearbox all built up and installed in the chassis. Not a lot to note on this. It went together pretty smooth, and it does seem to operate nice. And a couple thoughts that I had on this thing while putting it together. I mean, there's 6 gears in here, which 2 of them are plastic and the rest are metal, but all your larger gears are plastic, like this one right here. And this is the optional overdrive gear set here. These 2, you got 1 metal gear and 1 plastic gear, and that would be your overdrive. That's 10%, I believe. I went ahead and put the 6% factory, or I guess what they call stock option, in there. But one thing I thought about after building this thing up is this gearbox is actually pretty heavy. And I kind of would have preferred, I mean, I love that Element includes the overdrive in the chassis, or in the kit, but I kind of would have preferred if they'd done it like Axial does on like an XCX-10-2. If you want overdrive or underdrive, you would buy the front or rear gear set to over or under, whichever you're after, or both. And I think it would save the weight of those 3 gears, and I mean, it'd just be lighter. I would prefer it to be lighter and have it done in the axles. And to me, it would have probably also been cheaper just to include an extra, ring and pinion set in the kit rather than the 3 gears. But I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I'm not in marketing, so take that for what it's worth. Just my thoughts. But yeah, everything went together smooth there, so nothing really to talk about, and shows the next step as being the axles. So I'm going to go ahead and bust into the axle bags and get those put together. The axles are all built up now, and the next couple of steps in the book were to build the links and install the links in the chassis, and to build and install the drive shafts. And that's pretty standard boring stuff. I was kind of on a roll, so I just went ahead and just hammered through that. So I've got all the links measured, installed, all the differentials hung and everything. I've gone through and messed with the steering geometry somewhat, so everything should be real close to where it needs to be. As far as anything that I changed, pretty much the only thing I changed from the way the factory did it was that I used these SSD aluminum diff covers. One thing about the Element platform that I just cannot tolerate is the look of their differential covers. They're just butt ugly. So SSD luckily makes a really good looking one. It's got a little skid built into it, so it looks a little more scale. It's still kind of a weird shape to me. Doesn't have any bolts on the front, but it is what it is. It's a lot better than the factory ones, and I've got those both front and rear. And I actually really like the differentials on this truck. Other than that, I like the behind the axle steering, a little bit less to get hung up there on the front, but everything spins real smooth, and I think they're gonna work really nice. I like them a lot. So during the buildup of the axles, I did run into my first, I don't know if I want to call it a mistake so much as an omission in the book. There's one spot here that could really trip somebody up if they didn't know any better, and like if this was your first kit or anything like that. But what I found is here on page 10, where it has you installing the top link for the front 3-link right here. See if I can get the camera to show this. If you look at it, it basically makes it look like the 3-link bar goes from the frame over to the passenger side, and that is incorrect. The 3-link is actually on the driver's side frame rail of the truck, and then it's supposed to go into the driver's side on the top of the differential. So I don't know why they made these dark there to make it look like it goes between those two, but it actually goes between the two on the other side. And the second thing is that in a 3-link setup, when you have 2 slots for those links to go into, you actually want to take an extra ball end and put it in there as a spacer, because when you tighten this down, it can actually crack one of those ears off, and you don't want to do that, obviously. So that's one little thing. It doesn't mention it. It doesn't show that extra ball. It doesn't mention doing that. It doesn't show it in the picture. So if you are thinking about building this kit, or you have one of these you're going to build or whatever, pay attention to that, because that's one thing that could just trip somebody up if they didn't know any better. But that's really, so far, that's really the only thing I've found in the book. Seems like every kit I've done, there's mistakes and missing hardware and that kind of thing. But to this point, this thing's actually gone together real smooth. I've been really impressed with this kit. It's actually a really nice made kit. And so I've only got one bag left, and that is the shocks. And Associated left that step for dead last, I think because they know that absolutely nobody likes building shocks. Shock building just sucks. So I'm going to go ahead and get these built. And once I get the shocks built and get those installed on the chassis, I think that's pretty much going to be it for this video. And then I think I'm going to scrounge around and see what I can find for electronics. I already did have a servo I found, so I went ahead and installed that as I showed before. I've got a winch servo that I'm going to go ahead and install in the DSM mount back here. I'm not going to be able to get it all wired up. Well, I'll be able to wire it. I'm not going to be able to spool it and everything because I will have to get a low profile spool. I did a little test fit on it, and both of the winches that I have a tall spool that will actually hit the back linkage, the steering linkage there. So I'm going to have to get a low profile spool before I can actually make the winch work. But I do think that I've got a speed controller, winch controller. I've got a motor that I think I can scrounge out of my parts box. I really want to see this thing roll, so that's probably going to be the next video. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get to work on the shocks. Okay, so the shocks are all built, and the assembly didn't really go too bad. I had to chase one E-clip across the room, which for me is actually a pretty good day because usually I lose those things. They go flying. They're just no fun. I just hate building shocks. These weren't terrible, but I did run across one thing, and this is going to probably be the first thing that I really knock on Element for. Element is kind of known for building really high quality shocks, and that's one reason I was kind of excited about this kit is it has their, what they're calling their factory team shocks. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe they're a little better than the ones that come on the normal Element Enduro or the, you know, original builder's kit. But, and I'm sure the shocks are fine, honestly. But the one thing I did find is that on the top, I don't know what you call this, the ball socket piece here, a little clev of steel, you got your, let's see, the long one. So you've got the plastic ball ends that go in there. That's actually not it. It's right here. Okay, so you got the plastic ball end that goes in. But what I found is, you know, normally you got to snap those things in pretty hard. You got to use some kind of pair of pliers or something to snap those in there. But what I found with these is they will just fall right on through to the other side. There is absolutely no resistance on those things. There's nothing to hold them in there. Fortunately, the head on this bolt for the top shock mount is wide enough that the shock hole won't actually go over, or it won't actually go over the bolt. But that is really the only thing holding that in there. So basically, you put the ball socket together, you slide it in there, and then you got a little spacer, a little 3mm spacer that goes on the back. And I'm going to put in my little metal piece here. And that's it. But what you end up with is pretty sloppy. I mean, as you can see, those things just go all over the place. There's up and down travel. And the only thing stopping them is that they're actually hitting the frame. So they're actually hitting that top shock mount. That's what's stopping it. Right, you know, you can't see right there. But I'm just not real thrilled with that. I checked all my other trucks and literally none of them are sloppy like that, so I'm not really sure what the idea behind that was. I think I'm probably going to have to do some digging around and see if I can find some larger ball sockets. But I went all through the book because, you know, my first thought is it's me, I'm an idiot, so I could definitely do something wrong. But I checked the book and there's absolutely nothing in the parts list other than the two ball sockets that I have here. They're all the same size. I went through the whole, you know, extra parts list or optional parts list and checked the sizes, and they're all the same part number. So, you know, it's not me. I'm thinking, you know, I had to be missing something, but it doesn't really look like it. But other than that, the one thing I did do is I didn't really like the way the shocks were real straight up and down. And what I mean by that is they were, you know, just about hitting the frame in here. They were just, you know, real vertical. And luckily they give you a little 3mm spacers that are supposed to go up at the top here, but they give you this little extra parts tree of extra spacers, luckily. So what I did is I put, I'm sure it's probably a 5mm, I put a little spacer down there on both sides to kind of kick them out just a little bit on the bottom. I did that on the front and the back, and I kind of like the way that looks better, and it gives a little bit more leverage on the shock, and it's going to keep it away from the frame. So I'm really liking that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty well going to wrap it up. So my overall impression is actually really positive. Like I said, my only real dig at this kit is probably going to be those upper ball shock mounts. Just not happy about that. Don't like the way they fit. I'm going to have to fix that. But that's really the only issue. The assembly went very smooth. I do wish the transmission was a little bit lighter. It is kind of portly, but I'm sure it's going to work great. It's got the 6% overdrive installed in it. I did go ahead and just use the 30 weight oil that came with the kit in the shock, so I'm going to start there. Usually I like a heavier oil, at least in the back, sometimes in the front and the back, but I decided on this one I'm just going to try starting with the lighter oil, and if I don't like it I can always change it. But I really like those high clearance links, and I do also set my shocks pretty much all the way up. If I got a little bit of weight bias on one side, I'll raise one or the other just to level it out. But other than that, I tend to run my shocks all the way at the top, and I go to the top mounting point on the shock towers because I basically want it to sit as low as possible. I'm not a big fan of having, big tall trucks. I want them to be low. When you get on side hills, they don't want to topple over, that kind of thing. And I kind of just think it looks better usually too. So I don't know, but that's pretty much it. The kit doesn't really give you any pointers on how to set up tune the shocks or anything like that, other than they, tell you to set this. I forget what the distance is, but they give you a distance right here that they want you to set that adjustment collar down to, which of course I ignored. But yeah, there it is. That's the chassis. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to get all my electronics together. And I think this is probably going to be the end of this video, but in the next one, I'm going to get all the electronics mounted. I'm going to get everything fired up, test it, and see how everything works. So once again, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode. And hopefully by then as well, we will have a body picked out. I can't guarantee that, but we'll see how it goes.